Hey, I'm really excited that Jason Ulrich is our speaker today. Jason and I have met a couple of times. As I listened to Jason, there was kind of a life message embedded in his life story. And I thought that life message was really, really significant, even as he's walked through hard things in life. And, you know, in life you have a lot of different traffic that comes at you, and it's an opportunity to respond in a certain way. Yep. And it was fascinating listening to how he embraced hard things. So Jason's topic really fit in with our 3-month emphasis on embracing adversity in life and business. So I was very excited about him coming to share. He is the founder of Liberty Financial Group. At our table, he described himself as a serial entrepreneur. That's not Cheerios or Wheaties, right?
Right.
Right, yes, okay, good, want to clarify that. He's also a licensed CPA, been married for 22 years. Kirsten is here this morning. Thank you for coming, Kirsten. Jason had a good statement that I thought I'd use to introduce him, and it's at the end of his bio on the website. If you will commit to being a catalyst for positive changes that are so desperately needed in our world today, not out of selfish ambition, but truly believing with all your heart that you're doing it for the greater good, I have exciting news for you. Nothing in all of creation can stop you. Every obstacle persevered will be a stepping stone, and you will be blessed to be a blessing. Only believe. Isn't that a great statement? Welcome, Jason, with me. Thank you. You probably need to speak fairly. Could you hear us back there? Can you hear okay?
Great. So I thought I would start out with a joke. Is that okay? A professional kind of commentator, sort of a colleague, sends out a daily update, and he sent one the other morning, and I just laughed. It was quite comical. There was a gentleman who was a painter, and I don't know where this guy's background is, but apparently in the joke the painter is Scottish. And so he's having phenomenal success at outbidding everybody, and yet he's very profitable at what he's doing. He appears to be doing quite well as people observe him going about it. And behind the scenes, the fact of the matter is what he's doing is he's taking his paint and he's thinning it down with turpentine. So what he's done is he's basically lowered his costs, so he's got a competitive advantage, and then he can underbid all of the competition. So he's going along, and his competition doesn't particularly like him, but he gets this really big bid opportunity for this large new church that came into town. And so he's out there, he's got the scaffolding, he's got his paint, he's taken the turpentine, and he's really got it right where it's perfect the way he would typically apply it. So he's out there on the scaffolding, he's going crazy, he's painting this thing up, he's almost done, and all of a sudden a storm cloud comes in and it just pours buckets. And what happens is all of that thinned down paint runs. And he's horrified. And he realizes this is an act of God. He's telling me something here. And so he humbles himself in a pool of thinned down paint and water. And he says, "Oh Lord, what have I done? What do I need to do?" And there's this booming voice from heaven that says, "Repaint. Repaint. And thin no more." So I thought that was cute. I actually, I have a little bit of a curveball for you all this morning. I have a story that I'm going to share with you. A real story, but the names have been changed a little bit for the sake of anonymity, but it's a real story that happened right here in our community, and I want to share it with you because I think it's powerful. And if I can figure out how to do this the way that we set it up, I want to introduce you to Mr. Bieber, who is a industrious, hardworking Christian by faith, a professional, kind of an all-American young kid, grew up, had a lovely family, and ended up going into business with some folks. in my business, interestingly enough, and so this is how I know this individual quite well. They went into a business which is, if you weren't aware of it, is the mortgage business. And so I want to introduce you to Mr. Bieber's partners. We have Mr. Bull, who was kind of the money partner, a wealthy person, well regarded, perceived to have a lot of character and a lot of success historically in business. Mr. Toady, who's just kind of a middle-aged salesman, but who had worked for Mr. Bull in the past with some success. And we've got Mr. Labradoodle, another salesperson. Mr. Labradoodle is interesting. He's the connection point. So Mr. Labradoodle actually had a long-time friendship with Mr. Bull and with Mr. Bieber and kind of connected them. And then we had Mr. Porcupine. Mr. Porcupine was a retired copier salesman. Now, those names are used on purpose, of course. Mr. Bull is an individual who at times would be a bit like a raging bull in a china shop, if you can picture that, right? And also could be full of bull, right? Background in sales, could sell anybody anything, and so, but not always deliver, but did a great job of, getting them on the hook, if you will. And so Mr. Toady, and those of you that are not familiar with that term toady, basically a toady is a sycophantic follower. It's somebody they call a hanger-on, somebody who basically will kiss somebody else's shoes for their own self-promotion, right? So that's hence the term toady. And Labradoodle is just kind of fun because if you think about, here boy, something like that, you could picture the sort of the personality here a little bit. And Mr. Porcupine, while a lovely individual at times, had a bit of a propensity to bristle up and be very prickly with personality at times. And so they went into this business, and their timing was pretty good. The rates around them were good, the market was good, but they made a crazy gamble. Mr. Bull had heard in the news that subprime lending is where it's at. And I don't think there's probably anybody in the room who missed in the headlines of recent years that subprime lending probably wasn't a great move. And so Mr. Bull's decision kind of almost killed the company. Took a little bit of a long shot on that one and almost took the company down. And so Mr. Bull and Mr. Bieber were kind of individually huddling, trying to say, what do we do about this? What are we going to do? How do we turn this around? And those of you in finance, it was actually such a severe situation that the company's independent auditor came in and audited their financial statements and gave them what's called a going concern opinion. And what a going concern opinion is in the world of public accounting is your independent auditor coming in saying, I don't think you guys are going to be around much longer. I don't think you're going to make it. I think your business is more likely to fail than it is to succeed. It's a substantial doubt about its ability to continue as a going concern. So Mr. Bieber wasn't super excited about that. Mr. Bull, obviously, none of them were. And they made a decision. They made a decision that they needed to kind of lock arms and do some things. And so Mr. Bieber took on the role of being the president of the company. And Mr. Bull did something that he had never done before. He actually went ahead and kind of went to those deep pockets that he had and put some money in there to kind of shore up some of the losses that he had frankly been the one to cause. As a result of doing that, the company turned around. And the company made kind of an interesting decision at the time. They made a decision that they were going to support philanthropy. They were going to act a little bit more like a social enterprise, where they would take some of their money and they would allocate it to charitable causes. Stunning turnaround. The company flourished. It exploded. It went from being on the brink of destruction to exploding. It's not a coincidence that that happened. There is this interesting cause and effect thing that goes on. We call it the law of sowing and reaping. Some people would call it karma. Some people would call it the law of attraction. But when you commit to doing good, good things come full circle. It's around the world that way. And so the company really began to flourish. Unfortunately, as a result of that flourishing, Mr. Bull and Mr. Bieber often were at odds because, you see, Mr. Bull had stepped down from being the president. And both of them on a disc profile were pegging the scales as high D. And so now you've got this situation where you have these individuals, and to be clear, Mr. Bull was basically the chairman. He'd stepped back into the role of being the chairman. And so you have kind of these differences of opinion as to how do you do some different things. And Mr. Bull's kind of mindset was a little bit different. Mr. Bull's mindset was, you know, close the sale, but, you know, just do what you got to do to get by, right? And he would do interesting things like promise a compensation plan to his sales force, and then when they nailed it, and everybody realized that was too rich of a compensation plan, he wouldn't make the adjustment on a go-forward basis. He would, at the time of the payroll, say, guys, we're not going to pay that, I'm sorry. And so Mr. Bull had this interesting way of making it challenging for other people to really try to be of high character and do the right thing. And yet Mr. Bull loved the limelight. He loved the opportunity to be up there. But he was frugal. In fact, he was frugal to the point some people even referred to him as being a miser. By way of example, at times he would be out at dinner, and the check would come, and he would go ahead and pay it. And he would have people at dinner with him that would glance over at the tip and be horrified and be embarrassed and go back in after they all left and actually give their own money out of their own wallet to the waiter who had attended one. That was just the way that it was. And it's just, you know, there are folks that have gone through some things. Mr. Bull had gone through a challenging time as a young man, and so for him, money was just one of those things that he had a hard time releasing. At one point in time, with his partners that he had there, they had put some money in on a short-term basis as a loan during that period where they were trying to shore things up. And when it came time to repay them under the terms of the loan, he refused to repay the partners out of the money. It created a lot of stress. It created a lot of stress for them. Two of them actually ended up going out and getting medicated, you know, with antidepressants. It was a very stressful time for them. So as they kind of proceeded along the path, there was more and more friction between Mr. Bieber and Mr. Bull. And over time, what ended up happening is Mr. Bieber, unfortunately, came down with a terminal illness. It was an incurable autoimmune disorder. And so Mr. Bieber actually resigned. He stepped down from the company and he said, you know what, I'm not necessarily going to have that much more time left on the planet. And so he stepped down. And in stepping down, he had anticipated in good faith that his partners that he had had for several years would be supportive of him and his family and would buy him out, would pay him money that was owed and some things like that. And unfortunately, that didn't turn out like that. What they did instead is they decided that they couldn't afford to pay out Mr. Bieber. And so they left Mr. Bieber high and dry. And you have to understand, after kind of this cycle where they had been in a bad place with the subprime business that they had been in, there's reasons to certainly be kind of having a scarcity mindset and holding on to every penny that you have, as opposed to having an abundance mindset. And one way or another, Mr. Bull very effectively and cleverly got everybody kind of in his camp to kind of sign off on this deal of let's not take care of these folks. And so they kind of came to this really awkward place. And so I'm going to advance the slide. And I have quotes in here all throughout just because I love quotes. I should have mentioned that before. What ended up happening is within a year's time, Mr. Bull realized that there was no way he was going to be able to run that company on his own. So he found a buyer. He found a buyer. And those of you that have been in business and have seen companies sold, there are many ways that you can structure the sale of a company. You can sell the assets of the company. You can sell the stock of the company. There's different ways to structure the payout for that. And one of the ways to structure the payout is basically creating a compensation arrangement. so that you take the key employees. And it's a technique that's used because it allows you to retain key employees of the acquired company. But it also gives the acquirer a very beneficial tax situation. In other words, you get to write it off as you go. You get to expense the whole thing. You don't end up with any goodwill that you can't do a whole lot with. So Mr. Bull, being a very wise individual and not his first rodeo, he structured the sale of the company where he and Mr. Toady got a very generous compensation payout, and nobody else got anything. And we're talking millions of dollars. And nobody else got anything. So Mr. Toady and Mr. Bull were happy. Now Mr. Toady I have here as being boiled like a frog, because what happens if you put a frog in boiling water? It jumps out. But what if you put it in cold water and turn up the heat? It'll stay in there to the point of boiling and be cooked. And so Mr. Toady unwittingly had kind of allowed that searing of the conscience to occur. And understanding the circumstances had allowed themselves to kind of be pulled into this thing. Mr. Bieber lost everything. Lost everything. Lost his home, lost all the finances that he had in the world, everything that he had in his company, and other things that were going on in his life. Mr. Porcupine and Mr. Labradoodle had no clue what had just happened. They were just sales guys. They had no idea in the world that there was a clever plot that went down here in terms of how to structure the sale of the company. They did not realize that they just didn't understand. They were taken advantage of and never had any idea. They just wanted to kind of do their own thing. And so that's kind of how this thing played out. And so now you ask yourself, who is Mr. Bieber? Who's the guy I've been talking about? Guess what?
It's yours truly.
That's my story. And I got to tell you, what happened is a pretty cool thing. Because following all of that, I couldn't work in the industry, in this market. So I made an interesting career decision that I was not going to be able to work. I'd reached out to these guys and said, hey, maybe I could work here or that. We were kind of fighting through how do you get it out, and they'd sick their attorneys on me, and they're like, no, you can't work. And I have to tell you, I crafted one of the best shareholder agreements that I have ever seen. But I just never envisioned being on the wrong side of that document. And so it was ironclad, and there was no way for me to operate in business. So I was in this situation where I was just crying out to God. Just crying out to God, what did I do to deserve this? What did I do to deserve this? Here we were trying to do the right thing with this company, giving back to philanthropy. What happened here? What happened here? And there was almost an audible voice in response that said, be thankful that you did not get what you deserve. Yeah, that kind of hit me between the eyes, because the reality is, if you think about that in that context, I was very blessed to we talk about giving praise for sunshine. How blessed are we? How blessed are we, right? And so sitting here having my own little pity party about whatever it was, and there was a change that occurred there. There was a change in going back and saying, you know something? I don't care if it costs me everything. This was before everything had been lost. I am going to seek first the kingdom of God. That's what I'm going to do. And so we made a decision to move across the country and go to Bible college. And it was a cool story because we ended up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is the buckle of the Bible Belt. And I got down there, and originally I went down there thinking I was going to be the CFO of this company that was down there that was really recruiting me to get there. And that was not the right place to be. It was the wrong fit. And so I went to work for a company called Countrywide Home Loans. Some of you may have heard of them. And here's the funny story. I had actually been an advisor to the correspondent lending division of that company. The correspondent lending division is the group that buys closed loans. So small banks that make loans, they bundle them up and they sell them to bigger banks, basically. And so I knew most of the senior executives in the entire company. And so when I got to Tulsa, that was the only lender in that entire market that I even recognized the name of. I mean, I had just never heard of the little ABC bank and the XYZ bank, because it's really dominated by a lot of small community banks. So I went to work for them as a sales manager, and within no time at all, Countrywide was the lightning rod of controversy. That's when the whole thing blew up. That's when watch the guys being escorted out of the Lehman Brothers building in handcuffs with all the crazy stuff going on. And so Countrywide became the lightning rod of all that was wrong in the world suddenly. And there was this massive defection in that marketplace. Most of the leadership that was part of Countrywide defected to a competitor organization. And so I was flown down to Dallas to meet with a regional manager and some executives that had come in from Calabasas, California, to talk about taking on the assignment of actually managing and rebuilding this market for them. And I was pretty excited about it. I have to tell you, I was kind of down to my last dollar in a way here at this point in time in my life. And so I went down there, and I got excited about it, and then I said, you know, there's just this one thing. I have already enrolled in Bible college with my wife. And I'm sitting at a table where, you know, you don't obviously typically have a conversation like that at a table in a corporate setting with the executives from Calabasas. That's not something you would typically do. But I felt strongly that I needed to just tell it like it was and boldly live what I am, which is a follower of Christ. That's who I am. And I sat there and they said, well, I don't see how that would work. This is a big assignment. It's going to take a lot of work, and I don't see how a guy who is trying to go to Bible college is possibly going to have the time and show the level of commitment that it would take to do what we need to have done. I don't see how that could possibly work. I said, well, I would love the job, and they said, we would love you to have the job. I said, but I'm going to go home, and I'm going to talk to my wife, and I'm going to see what she thinks, and I'm going to pray about it. And they looked at me like, this guy has lost his mind. But that's what I did. And so I came home and I said to Miss Kirsten, here's the deal. And the first words out of Miss Kirsten's mouth were, seek first the kingdom. And for those of you who are not aware of that, that's a part of the Bible that Jesus, it's a very famous scripture in the Bible, and it's where Jesus is talking to people that are stressing out about all the challenges in their life around them. You know, what am I going to wear? How am I going to have enough food to eat? What am I going to do? And Jesus' admonition to them was, seek first the kingdom, and all these other things will be added on you. Don't worry about that stuff, but seek me. And that resonated to me, and it resonated to Miss Kirsten, so I came back and said, you know something, guys? Here's the deal. I'm not dropping out of Bible college. I feel like I'm here for a reason, but let me put together a 90-day plan for you, and I am convinced that once you see it, you'll know that I'm your guy. And so I did. I put together a 90-day plan. They said, you know what? You are a guy. Let's go for it. And I have to tell you, amazing, miraculous things began to occur. So here I am in Bible college half a day, and I'm back working in the company business. You know, and I kind of go in at midday, and I'd work till midnight if that's what it took. And things started to happen. I started having people come to me. I started having salespeople come to me. And I went from having an office in Tulsa that had nobody sitting in it, basically, a couple of operations people. And there was actually, in fact, a woman that came in to make her mortgage payment. Walked into this thing, and it's like a ghost town. And she walks in, and she's like, hello, is there anybody here? And so as she gets in there, I get up, I have a corner office, and I come out there, I'm like, yeah, what can I do? And she's, I need to make a payment. And she's looking around, and she goes, wow, you know, you hear about this on the news, but until you see it, you just have no idea. That's how bad it was.
Wow.
But amazing things began to happen. I began, you know, we were praying for good things to happen. my paycheck depended on good things happening. And good things did happen. We started to see people coming in, salespeople that were coming in and wanting a job, in spite of all the stuff that was going on, in spite of the fact that here is the lightning rod, the axis, if you will, in the mortgage lending world, this Countrywide. They started to come. And then eventually it was acquired by Bank of America. And that was an interesting journey. Those of you who have not been through a major acquisition of completely opposite cultures, I highly recommend that for a learning experience. But it was a pretty cool transformation, and it really turned around. And as we went through this, I need to stop and tell you that how did Mr. Bieber go from having a terminal illness to still going strong and making it through Bible college? Well, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, if any of you are sick, come forward, and the prayer of faith can heal you. And if the elders would, and I'm paraphrasing, so bear with me a little bit here, the elders would anoint you with oil, and prayer, the prayer of faith, you will be healed. And that is what happened to me. I was healed through the power of prayer. Pretty powerful. So then you say, what now? What do you do? How do you react to this? What's going to happen? Has anybody ever ridden a horse? What happens when you get bucked off a horse?
Get back on.
You get back on it, don't you? So as we kind of came full circle and had a couple stops along the way here, said, what do you do? Well, a pastor of mine one time said, go back to where you missed it. And that's kind of like getting back on the horse that bucked you off. So we rolled back into Liberty Financial Group and have refounded this company, which was the original same name of the company that we had, that was abandoned. And our purpose, which you can see on our website, is right there. That's what we're about, to honor and serve God by helping people. Our vision is a small one. We just want to change the world for the better. That's what we're about. Core values. I'm not going to read these all to you. What I want to draw your attention to is the first letter in red in each one of those. And read them down. Christ. That's what we're about. We're all about trying to live the values set by Jesus Christ. That's what we're about. And here's our mission statement. We are a social enterprise. But the first thing that we want to be able to do is offer the best possible technical help to people. You see, homeownership transforms lives. I didn't realize this until I was down in the Central Highlands of Guatemala with Agros, with Dave Carlson, and was involved in helping people buy their own real property, which in that country breaks bonds of generational poverty. You see, there's no middle class in that country. There's the haves and the have-nots, and that's not uncommon around the world. In the United States, we don't always think of it like that because we've got all kinds of things, good things going on, lots of prosperity. Look at all the Benzes and BMWs that you see right here, right outside of our windows. But let me tell you something. Home ownership changes everything. There are so many statistics about what home ownership does for families, how it strengthens families, how it builds the core of the family, how the children of those families go on to be successful. You don't have the teenage pregnancies. You don't have people dropping out of high school. And you know what happens over the course of a lifetime? The net worth of the individual is enhanced at least 30-fold compared to somebody who spent all of their life paying rent to somebody else. You guys remember the film It's a Wonderful Life? Mr. George Bailey's passion was helping people get out of that rental trap with mean old Mr. Potter, who was over there, you know. It's so true. It's so true. Well, the other thing that we wanted to do here, we wanted to be able to give the great advice to help people out. offer great rates. And then the last thing is to designate funds to go back to philanthropic purposes. And we originally started out with some partners on our website. You'll see that today. We've made a decision to actually create our own foundation. And we're doing that because it's easier for us to manage that. There's a lot of layers to it. It's actually something we had done in the past. So what we're going to do is we're going to it's a corporate tithe. 10% off the top is going to go into that foundation, and then that foundation is going to fuel philanthropic, charitable, humanitarian things, starting out locally and then looking for opportunities. So that's kind of what we're about with the deal. Now, what did we learn along the way? I love that quote at the top from Thoreau. What we learned is going with the flow is easy, isn't it? It's very easy to go with the flow. It's hard to swim against the current. But we figured out something that happens when you go with the flow, and it happens all the time. The decision that you consciously make to do the wrong thing because it's popular and it's easy, or the decision not to do the right thing because it wouldn't be popular, can get you in all kinds of adverse consequences, right? It can create a real challenge for you because you've now taken this path of least resistance, and by so doing, you just end up at the will and wiles of whatever associations and whatever influences and whatever things that you are not living your life on purpose. You are just kind of casually going with the flow. On the other hand, I would challenge anybody to name anybody in the history of humanity who accomplished anything great that did not have to fight their way the whole way. You see, this path, it's not about avoiding the obstacles. The path is the obstacles. That's what you're going to have. Those are your stepping stones on that path, those obstacles. And so it takes courage, a lot of courage to begin, and courage to press on against the opposition that's going to come. And this is a fact of life. Whether you want to be a collegiate athlete, whether you want to compete in an Ironman triathlon, it does not matter what you face. If you set it before yourself as your definite purpose to do something extraordinary, you will face opposition. I'm here to tell you, there's no easy path. Lesson learned, right? So, along the way here, I've come up with, for you all today, 3 keys. 3 keys that have been helpful to me when it comes to overcoming adversity. And the first key is avoiding the unnecessary by making the best possible decisions. And I want to introduce you to something called the OW principle. Has anybody ever heard of the OW principle? I think you're going to like it. The first part of the OW principle is to assess what are your options. You're at a crossroads, you've got to make a decision. You have to understand what are my options. Now the second one is the filter that is going to maybe mess with some of you a little bit. And I say, what does the Word of God say? Now some of you say, what is he talking about? I'm talking about the Bible. And I would, those of you that are not as familiar with the Bible, there's incredible wisdom there. You know, the Psalms and the Proverbs, and particularly the Gospels, where we read about the wisdom of Jesus imparting things to different disciples. There is such wisdom there. And so when we're faced with this situation, we look at what are our options. And we go to the Bible and we look at it for, you know, the wisdom of the ages wrote that. What can we do? What are our options, and what are we going to do based on what the Word tells us to do? This, and then we have to listen. I must mention something very important. There's a great quote I love. Corrie ten Boom wrote, or stated, it's been written, she stated it. We need to have prayer as our steering wheel and not as our spare tire. Isn't that the truth? And see, what happens to us, our conscience will guide us. Our conscience will guide us. That little still small voice will really scream. hey, don't do that, that's a dumb idea, don't go there, don't go into business with this person, don't hang out with those people. Whatever those things may be, whatever those decisions are, whatever those crossroads are, and so we have the filter. Now I would also offer to you that those of you who would not feel comfortable doing this, I've used this in business. I shared the core values that I have. I suggest that everybody have core values and build community around those, that everybody understands what those are. And what I've done in the past is change the W to what do our core values say. And that's an effective tool in business without it being, you know, here's what I think the Bible says for you. Because that may be a little over the top, I recognize that.
2 minutes.
Oh man, I'm going to have to fly. No problem. Actually, I've got a little film at the end of this, and we're going to skip the exercise. The second one is developing a positive mental attitude. Realize that adversity is just part of what happens. That is just, and you have to have a positive mental attitude. And that means you've got to hang around happy people, you've got to read inspiring things, you've got to stay pumped up, and you've got to keep it in context. Laugh, and the whole world laughs with you, right? It's so important that you keep the positive mental attitude. That's how you stick it through to the end. And then the last one is you've got to believe. You've got to faith it till you make it. And it's a funny thing, because sometimes people give up just an inch short of where they would have had their breakthrough. Sometimes, you know, there's a reason why there's a saying that says it's always darkest before the dawn. Stay in there. Keep on believing. Stay positive, and amazing things will happen. Now, I have a little exercise for us, and we're not going to have time to do this, but I want you all, if you would, to take note of this and give some thought to this. If you knew that there was nothing in the world that could stop you from succeeding, what would you do to change the world for the better? I want you to think about that. And then what I'm going to do is ask you to finish strong.